In the last stream, we were working on replacing our water wheel setup to allow us to produce a much larger amount of stress units to power all of our create contraptions simultaneously without having to repeatedly disconnect different bits of shaft and turn off different devices to allow us to stay under our stress unit limit. And right now we have the one steam engine on a fairly small boiler producing 16,382 stress units, I believe. That is then being pumped up into our rotational speed controller, allowing us to very precisely set the speed at which all of our stress units are being rotated, and thus allowing us to kind of maximize the amount of stress units being used and get the maximum speed out of every contraption that we have. And one of my plans for today's stream is going to be to upgrade this with even more blaze burners to get even more stress units via even more steam engines. Along that line, over here, we did also set up the automatic sand sifting setup at the end of the last stream. And since the end of the last stream, that has been chugging away to the point where we now have almost 800 flint. That's not just from sifting. I did also move some flint from our chests upstairs down into here to free up some space, but we do have almost 200 clay, and crucially, we have got 79 blaze powder, which is more than enough for us to make 8 more blaze burners today and really saturate this boiler, which is definitely one of the things I would like to do. Whilst all this was running, I was working on a little bit of base expansion up here. So I've built a second outer ring, and to give the base a little bit of depth, I've raised it up by a couple of blocks as well. The main purpose for this is just to give us space to put all of the stuff that we need to build going forward. I've moved the blast furnace up here, and I've also kind of reorganized some of the stuff that was on this level of the base. Again, nothing is new, nothing has gone, it's all just reorganized from where it was previously. And my first plan for today is going to be to get a coke oven down here. That's one of the very first quests here in the Industrial Renaissance quest line, and it's going to allow us to get a lot more steel, because if we want to build really any of these multi-blocks from immersive engineering, the 3 we need being the metal press, the crusher, and the industrial squeezer, we are going to need a lot of steel. The quest here does tell you what you need. So for the crusher, for example, we need 10 light engineering blocks, 10 steel scaffolding, 1 redstone engineering block, 8 steel fence, and 9 hoppers, and a lot of steel is required for that. Obviously, steel scaffolding requires steel. I think the light engineering blocks might not require any steel. They don't. They do require a fair bit of iron, though, in the form of iron plates, and so we are also, hopefully, in today's stream, going to look at automating the washing of all of our iron, copper, zinc, and gold that we're getting from our gravel sifting into iron, copper, zinc, and gold nuggets, and then hopefully directly into ingots, so that we don't have to keep manually taking all of our raw resources from over here, taking them over to our washing depot over here, and then waiting for them to turn into nuggets and crafting them into ingots manually. It's not a particularly difficult set of instructions to do, but it would be much nicer if it was all done automatically for us. And so that's kind of the plan. But as I alluded to, the very first thing I want to do is get that coke oven up and running, because the coke oven and the blast furnace are both very, very slow. So to make the coke oven, much like the blast furnace, it's made with 27 bricks. This time around, we need 27 coke bricks. Thankfully, these are not particularly difficult to make. They're made with 4 clay, 4 brick, and then some sandstone. Right now, we do have a lot of sandstone, thanks to the fact that down here, we are actually backing up on sand inside of this drawer. So we can just take some of that, craft it, of course, into sandstone, ideally like this, and that should be more than enough for the 9 lots of this coke brick recipe that we need. Again, thankfully, we've started getting clay now from our sand sifting endeavors as well. And so really, it should just be a case of smelting some of this clay up on the surface here. Let's do this, and let's do this. We'll also go ahead and, of course, use our temporal pouch to make that a fair bit faster. 36 brick is the amount that we're looking for. Whilst we wait for that, one small little quality of life thing that I would like to do is I would like to finally get those elevators that we talked about a few episodes ago to make it just that little bit easier for us to move up and down throughout the base. Because whilst falling and then typing /home does work, it is going to be just a little bit nicer if we can just use an elevator. So to do that, we are going to need 2 more ender pearls. As we saw in the last episode, we can get ender pearls fairly quickly by accelerating our endo flame here and then just dropping these gas tiers into the mana pool once it has enough mana. We could look at adding more endo flames to the setup and getting a more sophisticated mana generation system up and running. The reason that I've not done that is if we look just a little further ahead in the quest line here, there is a quest to make a Blacker Lotus. This is usually an item that's not creatable from Botania because it's an item that when you drop it into a mana pool, it just produces mana. Thankfully, in this pack, it does have a recipe, and the recipe is actually surprisingly easy. Once we automate the production of hop graphite dust, we can then use a tiny amount of mana to make a Blacker Lotus, and then that Blacker Lotus can be dropped into the mana pool to make way more mana than it costs to make. And so, once you get to this stage in the pack, this is essentially an unlimited mana generation system, and so I don't really think it's worth our time at the minute to invest in a ton of Endo Flames or even in a ton of more sophisticated mana generating flora, because it's not going to be too long before we can kind of do away with all of that in its entirety and just use those Blacker Lotuses. And once we have enough mana for those 2 Ender Pearls, back over here, we just need to take some of our string. It does only take 8 wool to make 1 elevator, but 1 elevator on its own is practically useless. You do need 2 of these to actually make them work, and the idea here is that you can place one of these into the ground, like so, and then you can place the other elevator above or below this elevator. I believe in this version of Minecraft, you can go any number of blocks. I don't think that they are distance limited, but essentially, if you put the other elevator directly above or below the pre-existing elevator, you can then use spacebar to jump up and shift to go down between the two very, very quickly. And that is just going to be a little bit easier than typing /home and /back, and it's going to be even quicker than us jumping off the platform over and over again. And so back over here, we have 64 brick. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and see if we can't craft up all of the required coke brick. We can indeed. We got 39, which is too much coke brick, but there is, I think, a non-zero chance that we do end up making another coke oven at some point in the not-so-distant future, simply due to the fact that I think this coke oven is going to be very, very, very slow. And so once we put it down in the exact same way that we did with the blast furnace, we just right-click with the engineer's hammer, and now this should be able to begin turning regular coal into coal coke. The good news is it doesn't require any fuel, it doesn't require any power, it just turns regular coal into coal coke and also gives you the byproduct of creosote oil, which can be used to make treated wood. You can also use creosote oil as a fuel for the blaze burner if you have the straw, which we'd made in the last episode. The downside of the coke oven is that it is very, very, very slow. As you can see, it's going to take a while to do this. The upside there is that it does burn longer inside of the blast furnace, and so I think it's probably going to be worthwhile. The reason we need this is that, as we saw previously, using the blast furnace, we really only have the option of using either charcoal or coal coke, and as you can see, the charcoal burns very, very quickly, which is not ideal. The coal coke should burn just that little bit longer and is easier to make than charcoal because the coke oven doesn't require any fuel. The second downside here, though, is that I'm fairly certain you can't pipe into the blast furnace automatically. You can pipe into and out of the coke oven, that does work, but if you want to be able to pipe into and out of the blast furnace, you have to first upgrade to the reinforced blast brick and then use that to make an improved blast furnace, which you can then send items into and pull items out of. For now, with this, I don't think that's possible, and you'll see here, it really is tearing through the charcoal just to make 1 steel. So we'll take this out, and we'll swap this over. Hopefully after this piece of charcoal is done, we're going to get an idea as to how much better the coal coke is. It really doesn't need to be that much better to be worth doing, simply due to the fact that this is essentially a free process, whereas the charcoal does require fuel. But as you can see, this does seem to be lasting a fair bit longer. And so essentially, chat, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to leave this going. We might look at setting up a second coke oven just because of really how slow this is. We do probably here want to get a tank for creosote, and I keep forgetting that I do have my wireless remote now. I don't have to keep going back to the network route in order to do any crafting. The reason we're going to want a tank here is simply due to the fact that once the creosote backs up inside of the coke oven, it then stops the coke oven from working. And so one thing we're definitely going to want to do is grab our fluid pipes from here, along with any of the wrenches, and then just do something like this, and like this, just so that we have a buffer for that extra creosote, and it's going to work a little longer before it fully backs up on creosote. And so real quick, what I'm going to do now is I am going to go ahead and take all of the blaze powder that we have in here, and I'm going to whip up a bunch more of these blaze burners, 8 more to be specific, and put them down under the boiler. I'm then also going to craft up a few more of these crucibles and a few more of these campfires to allow us to essentially produce enough lava to feed all of the blaze burners underneath this boiler. And then we'll come back, we'll look at upgrading the boiler, and we'll also look at automating the washing of these metals here while we wait for our steel to very slowly come in. Okay, so a little bit of work later, and we essentially have the same system we had before here, but just on a larger scale. So now, instead of 1 crucible, we have 6, along with 6 campfires, and then we've got, of course, our cobblestone generator over here. It's underneath this drawer. In fact, we can see it if we go further down this water vata right here. And that, of course, is feeding cobblestone up into the drawer that is then being pulled out by the item pipes distributed to all of the fired crucibles, which are all producing lava. And then that lava is being extracted up into this tank, and then from there extracted up into our 9 blaze burners, all of which have been given a straw to allow them to run on lava. We did run into a slight problem where some of the blaze burners got connected to the water pipe, and some of the blaze burners did start to fill up with water. You have 2 choices there. You can either put a tank down and kind of pull the water out of the blaze burners using a pipe, or you can just shift right click with a wrench, pick up the blaze burner, and then put it back down. It will go down again without any fluid in it. I found that to be the easier way of doing it, especially given that we don't really care too much about losing the water. And so now we should be at a point where we're able to produce more energy. In fact, already you'll see that we're producing 32,782 stress units via, it says via 1 engine, but this 1 engine here is actually only producing 16,384. So I think if we want to take full advantage of that, we are going to need another engine. And I think if we really want to take advantage of our 9 blaze burners here, we're going to have to make our boiler much, much bigger. And to do that, we need many more of these fluid tanks, because I think we want to get at least a few more levels to this, and of course we do want to get a few more steam engines as well. Thankfully, none of this too difficult. Copper is of course fairly straightforward. We've got a ton of it waiting to be washed over in our little box. And then in terms of the steam engine here, again, mostly just copper with a little bit of gold and a little bit of andesite. Up on the surface here, this has been working away. Over here, we have got 17, a whopping 17 steel. I'm going to start moving over the coal coke now so we can hopefully get even more steel. And I think what we'll do, before we start upgrading our boiler, I think we'll instead pivot over and see about automating the washing of these resources. So what I think I'm going to do here, actually, first of all, before I do any of that, I'm going to quickly whip up 2 more of these gold chests. You don't have to use the upgrades. You can just craft the gold chest directly from a regular chest, which is substantially easier. If we do this and this, we can hopefully get 2 of those. We don't have enough gold. That is fine. Do I have any more filtered link cable? I do. For now, this will do. Once we get the gold automated, we can then go ahead and upgrade that iron chest to a second gold chest. For now, that's just going to give us space, because we are very much so out of space when it comes to putting a lot of our stuff here back into the system. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and take down this wall of mechanical crafters, and I'm going to move it to the other side of the base. The reason for that is that I want to set up our ore washing system right here. And the reason for that is just that it's fairly close to our dock, and we need to be able to pull from that dock out onto a depot that is then going to wash the ores, and then we need to send items back around to the dock, because my plan here is to have all of our iron ingots, gold ingots, zinc ingots, and copper ingots feed back into this dock, and we're going to use the dock to store those resources. So I think what we are going to do is I'm probably going to move the dock actually kind of over to here, maybe. And I'm going to do that just with item pipes. So right now we've got the item pipes kind of coming out of the side of the sifter. I think it's going to end up looking nicer. If I take this and put it down here, that does move perfect. I think it's going to look nicer if we kind of move all of these just to the undersides of the sifters. That way we don't really see the item pipes. I think it's just going to look like a cleaner setup. So I'm going to put the item pipes here, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, of course, over under the sand sifter as well, right about here. We'll make sure both of those are set to extract. Boom and boom. We are, of course, going to have to dig through the floor here like this in order for this drawer to feed round and through to the dock, but I think that's fine. And then using our new lower base platform, we're just going to run an item pipe all the way around and over into the bottom of the dock. And there we go. We now have an item pipe that is running all the way along over to our dock. And I've gone ahead and, of course, reconnected this up using some filtered link cable to allow us to access what is going on here. So now I think we're going to pivot over and start to utilize the belt system from Create to allow us to filter and extract what comes out of this dock, because as we saw in the last episode, it's a little pricey to filter the item pipes. You need a diamond upgrade, and we don't yet have that ability to make diamonds. And so instead, we're going to start using the funnels from Create. Specifically, I think we want the brass funnel here. Thankfully, it's not too difficult to make. It's made with electron tubes, brass ingots, and then dried kelp. The dried kelp here is also used in the making of conveyor belts, which we're also going to use, these mechanical belts here. The dried kelp, super easy to get, it's just kelp that has been smelted, and kelp we actually don't have just yet, but we can get by either sifting sand through a string mesh, there's a 5% chance here, or we can sift dirt through a string mesh in our Create sifter. This does need to be waterlogged, but it does give a 20% chance, which is of course 4 times higher. Although, given the amount of sand that we have, and given that we really only need 1 kelp to then be able to get a lot more kelp, I think this waterlogged sieve might be the easier way of doing it, just because we've got so much sand in here, and we really don't have that much dirt. And so, for the 3rd episode in a row, I think I'm going to replace down these sieves here. I should probably, at this point, just find a permanent location for them. Unfortunately, the carry-on mod does not work with that sieve there. That's fine. Let's also, of course, get our meshes out. Now, these do need to be waterlogged, actually, if this is going to work. And so, real quick, let me pick these up. Let me get a bucket. I did have to use some of my buckets to make more fluid pipes earlier, but we do still have one left. Let's go and see about waterlogging these in a more permanent location, and then we'll do a quick bit of sand sifting to see if we can't get just that one bit of kelp. Okay, so I've set up a little 3x3 area over here that we can use for our sieves, filled it with water, of course, and then we'll get those sieves down, and it hopefully should now just be a case of taking our sand and then sifting that, hopefully not too many times, to get some kelp. Nice. Cool. So going forward, there are 2 options here. We can grow this in a botany pot with some water. Alternatively, we can also, I think, grow it very quickly if we just plant it underwater. Because one thing I did do a second ago is we, of course, needed more bamboo in order to make more straws for our blaze burners. And thankfully, the mod that allows us to shift to make trees grow faster does also work on plants like bamboo, and you can very quickly get a very large amount of bamboo using that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we should be able to do the exact same thing with the kelp. The tricky bit here is just kind of getting a pillar of water that we can then grow the kelp inside of. And so it's going to look bad, but if we temporarily do something like this, maybe grab our building wand out of here and just do something like this, making sure to shift and scroll to set the restrictions to none, we can then do, I think, one of these, and then down at the bottom, this might have to be planted on dirt, although I'm not entirely certain if that's the case. Can I plant it on stone? I can, cool. And then if I shift down here, this is going to very quickly grow, and we can just hold down left click to break the kelp as it grows, and as you can see, we can then use that to very quickly get a large amount of kelp, making sure, of course, you don't break the very bottom piece, and of course, making sure that you don't suffocate. Perfect. So now that we have the kelp here, we should be able to very quickly, using our temporal pouch to accelerate, smelt this over in here. Boom, and boom. Once we have 1 kelp, that's enough to make 1 set of brass funnels. I do think we are going to need more than 2 brass funnels. We might need 4 or 6, and so we are going to make a few more sets of these. We also, of course, do need to get even more of these electron tubes, which means even more polished quartz. The rose quartz itself, not too difficult, but of course, the sandpaper does require the paper, the sand, and the water. Again, thankfully, none of that should be too difficult. It's all stuff we've done before. We do still have more sugarcane that we can drop over here to get a single piece of paper, and we do still have our blaze burner underneath the mixer with some water in it that we can use along with the sand, and of course, some fuel for our blaze burner to get us sandpaper. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and make some more electron tubes here. We can then, of course, also use the dried kelp to make belts. You'd only get 1 belt at a time, but the belt can cover multiple blocks in-game. We'll show that off in just a second. But for now, I'm going to make maybe like 6 brass funnels, and then we'll look at using those and filtering those to automate the washing of our ingots. All right, so now we've got some more polished rose quartz. Let's go ahead and make the electron tubes here. For those, we just need some iron. Of course, we can just whack that down over on here. That's going to make itself into plates, and once we have at least 3 of those, we can make ourselves at least 3 electron tubes and then at least 6 brass funnels. And the idea here is that we can use these to extract items from inventories, like the dock, onto belts. Specifically, if we shift right click on here, by default the arrow is pointing in, but we can take our wrench, right click it, and now it's set to extract. You'll see that if you set it to extract without any kind of filter, it will just extract anything, starting with the leftmost slot in the inventory. We want to tweak that to only extract the zinc, the iron, the gold, and the copper. The way that we do that is, you guessed it, using a filter. Specifically, we want to use either a list filter or an attribute filter. I think the list filter here is going to be the better option for us. The attribute filter is a little bit more advanced, but for now, the list filter is a very basic filter in which you just list the items that you want to be extracted. In our case, that is raw zinc, raw iron, raw gold, and raw copper. Over in the filter, you just right click, and then you can just add these to the filter. Shift right click also works here. And once they are added, you can then right click this onto the little filter slot at the top of the brass funnel, like so. And now if we once again change this to extract, you'll see that it begins pulling out the items listed. Cool. What we're going to do next is we're going to use these belts to move the items to where they need to go. So we need to move this specifically over to a depot. So I'm going to move this encased fan and this depot over here to allow us to do this automation. We don't need that much of a gap here. In fact, I think if we just put, I kind of want it centered though, actually, now that I mentioned it. The centering I think is going to look nicer. So I'm going to put the depot down right here. And then we're going to use this distance in between for our conveyor belts. Real quick, let me put these away just to free up some inventory space. To place down the conveyor belts, you do need shaft. You need to put one shaft down where you want the conveyor belt to start. For us, that's right here. And one down where you want it to end. For us, that's right here. You can make these longer. I think there might be a 16 block limit for how far you can go with one belt before you have to put down another one. But for us, we just right click at the start, right click at the end, and it puts down a belt. Nice. And now, the way that this works, which I can demonstrate with the crank that we have here, is you apply rotational energy to the belt, and in doing so, it then activates the funnel to extract, and it'll take items and place them onto the depot. The good news is you can keep providing the rotational energy because once the depot is full, the belt will stop moving items, nothing ends up on the ground, nothing spews everywhere, which is good. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to move the water, of course, from here over to here because it's washing that we want to do. And then just to make it a little bit nicer, I'm also going to do this and this so the water's not flowing down into the void. And then we're probably going to end up putting our encased fan right up against the back wall there. So let me take this guy, and he's going to go down right here. I think it's going to be easier to place down if I temporarily place down a block behind it, although that block behind it is, of course, going to have to become some kind of gearbox so that we can get rotational energy to that encased fan. So let me get rid of this, and let's put our gearbox down like so. And so we can run that up, of course, and connect it to our pre-existing rotational energy. We did, of course, just get rid of our wall of mechanical crafters, and so there is some rotational energy that we can tap into. And so the idea here is that we're going to extract over onto the depot, and then we want to extract off of the depot onto another set of belts. That second set of belts is then going to take our finished product. In fact, looking at this, it might be easier. Let me test something. If I pick this up and if I put this one block further up, I don't know if this works. I think by default this doesn't work. But if we take another funnel and we do this, I think this now will work. It totally does. So it is a bit more expensive, but it allows us to bring this up by one. The reason I want this up by one is that our next belt is going to have to go in the ground again like this, and I don't really want to have the next belt being even lower down than the pre-existing belt. It's going to be even easier to get kinetic energy to this second set of belts if it is on the same level as the first set of belts. So let's make another 3-wide belt. For that, we do need 6 more dried kelp. Unfortunately, we don't quite have 6 more dried kelp. Thankfully, we do still have some, and of course, we can get more very quickly. I am impatient, so I'm going to do a quick one of these, and boom, good stuff. Let's do this, and down here, let's do this. So what I want to do here is kind of twofold. I want to extract the finished product. The main product we're after here, of course, are nuggets, but we do also get byproducts from all of these. So we have the zinc nuggets, the iron nuggets, the copper nuggets, and the gold nuggets, but we also get things like redstone and gunpowder there as byproducts that we also do need to take into account. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to use one of the quests right here, the compactor, to turn the nuggets automatically into ingots. This is a pretty nifty little machine. It does require 4 pistons, 4 redstone, and a crafting table, but for the most part, not too difficult to make. We'll put that down right about here, and again, we'll put another funnel down like this to allow the items extracted from here to go into the compactor. Over here, we're going to use another filter. This filter is going to do the exact same thing as the previous filter, only this time we're going to set it to pull the nuggets and the byproducts and not the raw products. In fact, what I think we can do, if we want to be a little bit more efficient about this, is we can just go ahead and blacklist or deny list the products we don't want to extract. So here, instead of allow list, we can change this to a deny list, and we can say deny raw iron, raw gold, raw copper, and raw zinc, and we can put that there. So now that's going to extract anything that's not on the depot. And so over here, all those products are going to end up in the compactor. The first thing I want to do is turn off recursive crafting, because that's not what I want to do here. I just want to do one craft, turning nuggets into ingots. This does require power, which is where it's going to get a little bit expensive. We can, of course, throw down our alternator here to make that happen. And I think I have to rotate that, which I might be able to do with my wrench. I totally can. Cool. And we're probably going to want to put that on the backside as well. But that should go ahead and compact all of our nuggets into ingots, and then from there we can then extract from this compactor, again using a brass funnel, and we just need to feed back around into the dock, which might be easier said than done with our current dock positioning, but we should be able to make it work. Real quick, what I'm going to do some rerouting with our shafts and with our gearboxes to get these guys online, and then we'll come back and we'll figure out the extracting with the compactor. Okay, so not too long later, and I've decided that I'm going to run another belt along the front here to send items back. So we've put another brass funnel coming out of the compactor. Oh, it's not coming out right now, but it will be coming out like this. And then we're going to have a belt that goes from here all the way to here. And over on the end here, we've got another brass funnel that's going to feed into the dock. And so items should get extracted, washed, sent over to the compactor, and then loop back around. We are going to have to set up a different system to try and filter off the gunpowder and whatnot. I think what we might be able to do is change the filter on this brass funnel to just be nuggets, and then put another brass funnel on the front here that pulls out everything that's not a nugget and just sends it straight through to the dock. I think that would work out quite well. Over on the back here, what we're going to do, we've pulled down some shaft power, of course. The fan is working. It's blowing over this way. It's managed to turn all of the raw zinc into zinc nuggets. But what we can do down here is we can use these encased chain drives. These are pretty straightforward, just andesite casing and iron nuggets. And essentially all these do is they allow you to kind of carry over the same rotational force and direction that you currently have. So if I were to do something like this, I can put down my crank to show you how this works, which might be in the system. It is indeed. If we do this, as we rotate this one, they all rotate. The benefit here is that now, over here, we have this gearbox feeding into the encased fan. If I were to go ahead and put down these here, here, and here, what we should then be able to do is just place down a gearbox directly beneath this gearbox, and that's going to begin rotating all of these. Nice. And you'll see that now everything is moving, at least on the front. And over here, this is working correctly. All of the zinc is in here. Of course, this does need power in order for it to actually work, but for the most part, that is working. Now we need to have this go the other way. To make that happen, we might want to put down some more gearboxes. I don't know if this is going to work, actually. Let me get some more. My first thought process is to put down 3 gearboxes, but I think that might go in the same direction. What we might be able to do is get like 2 chain drives and 1 gearbox, and that might do what I want it to do here. Specifically, if I put a gearbox here and then a chain drive here and here, that does indeed rotate in the opposite direction. Look at that. Nice. And so now this is kind of good to go. We just need to get power to the compactor. We also need to get 2 more funnels. We don't need 2 specifically, but we're going to have to make 2 because they're made in batches of 2. And so let's go ahead and do something like this. Let's also grab sandpaper. I do have 1 sandpaper in the system with 1 durability left. The reason I have 1 sandpaper with 1 durability left, by the way, is that I didn't mention it earlier, but these stairs here are from Create. These are catwalk iron stairs. I was looking at all the different stair options available to us and deciding which ones would work well with the base design. And there are not that many stairs in the pack. There's also no mod that allows us to kind of retexture stairs to a given block. And so I did end up going with these catwalk stairs. They're not particularly expensive, and there are some others that look quite nice. I really like the brass ones here. But they are a little finicky. You got to make polished iron bars, which you make, you guessed it, by polishing iron bars using the sandpaper. It then also requires iron catwalk, which is iron plates and more polished iron bars. And so not expensive, just a little bit of iron. And the hardest part is, of course, just the sandpaper, really. That does mean that we had one sandpaper left. That, thankfully, is all we need to make an electron tube. From there, that should be everything to make another set of brass funnels. And like I said, I'm going to have one brass funnel coming off here. We are going to need to get more filters for this. And for the extra filters, that's just wool and iron ingots, easy enough. So I'm going to do this. I'm also going to put the filter on in just a second. I want to, in fact, this is actually one of those situations where the brass filter could be potentially better because the brass filter allows you to filter based on an attribute. And here what we can do is we can take a reference item, for example, this zinc nugget, we can place it in here, and the filter that we want is tagged forged nuggets. If we then go ahead and click add to attribute list, this is now going to filter for any item that is a nugget, essentially. If we then change this to deny list and we put it in here, this is now going to pull anything that isn't a nugget, especially if we change it like this. So now that should pull out anything that's not a nugget. Right now, there's nothing that's not a nugget on there. If my gunpowder is on there, it should get extracted, although I don't think I can put that on there right now. Over here, we probably want to change this filter to the exact same thing. We want to make another one of these attribute filters, put in one of our nuggets. Any nugget will do. Change it. You just use the scroll wheel, by the way, here to move up and down between these. Change it to forged nuggets. Click add. This time we want allow list. Put it on there. And that should work. So again, the final thing really that we need to do here is get power to this alternator. And for that, we're probably going to need, you guessed it, more gearboxes, shafts, and chain drives potentially. So let me get like 3 more cogwheels. Are we completely out of shaft? We are completely out of shaft. And we're also completely out of andesite alloy as well, which is not ideal. I did begin moving my mana back over to this pool so that we can hopefully do something like this with our cobblestone to get yet more andesite. And of course, we are now quite flush with iron, and so we should be able to get even more andesite alloy here, hopefully fairly easily. Boom, boom, fantastic. Let's do a few more of these. It is very nice that you get 8 at a time. It would be horrendous if you didn't. And then let's do, let's say, this. And I'll make a few more gearboxes here because I think we are going to need them in the not-so-distant future. We can then also do 3 of these, and I will take my shaft back. So now, down here, can we get this up and running? We need shaft power going into the top of this. That's probably going to be via a vertical gearbox like that. We're then going to pull that out this way, of course, around over here. And I'm just going to put another vertical gearbox down, let's say right here. I think we could potentially use more chain drives there, but for now, this should do the trick. Let's do yet another vertical gearbox, put that down like this. That instantly overstresses the network, and that is where we need to upgrade our boiler via more tanks and more steam engines. Do we have what it takes to make another steam engine right away? The answer might surprise you. It's no. Though I think it should be pretty straightforward. Let's make a few more blocks of copper here. Ideally, we want 8 more if we're going to make the maximum 9 that we could fit on top of here. And then we'd also want to get, let's say, 9 more gold plates. We don't have 9 gold, but we can get this going with just 5 for now. Of course, this is overstressed. Let me quickly disconnect that there. We should have the ability to get this up and running. It's just going to be a case of actually getting these steam engines online. So if I go and add this to our pre-existing setup, I'm thinking if we put this down where we put down our decorational andesite casing last time, so instead of putting this here, if we put this here, and of course put down another shaft like this, that should hopefully now double up our stress units. And so now back over here, I'm hopeful that double the number of stress units is enough to get this going. It is, cool. And it seems to be enough to keep the power going in here. And so now back over here, we want to, of course, put the gunpowder into these slots here. We don't want all of this other stuff in here. We got so much junk backing up in here. None of this wants to be in here. Thankfully, none of it should be in here going forward. If it, oh, it is going in here. Hold on. That's because I've not refiltered this since I moved it. So there is a button that you can press right here that allows you to import the contents as a filter. As you can see, it doesn't really work that well. It's only pulled some of the items as the filter, which is not ideal. The good news, though, is that we can go ahead and manually re-add the other items to the filter here, and that should stop it from putting other junk into here, which is what has happened just there. Let me empty this out. But I think that this is basically good to go then. We do want to make sure that stuff like that never ends up on there, but this is working actually surprisingly well. The slowest part of the whole process is just the fan washing setup here, but for the most part, this is doing just fine. People in the Twitch chat have pointed out to me that you do not get faster washing by making this spin faster. The only way I think to get faster washing is to have more fans blowing on the depot, and the only thing that increasing the speed of the fan does is increase the distance at which the water blows, or the distance at which the fan blows. This is looping. Oh, it is looping, and that's because this doesn't have... Hold on, okay, fine. I need to add, like, another attribute to the deny list. Hold on, let me take this off. That makes a lot of sense. Let me do this. Can be washed is a filter. So if it can be washed, it also should not be extracted from the dock. There we go. So now it's not going to extract nuggets, and it's not going to extract anything that can be washed. I think that should work out much nicer. And of course, if we wanted to here, we could do a quick one of these, and that should hopefully very quickly get us a lot of resources. Obviously, this is going to kind of just run in the background. Right now, it's got a lot of raw materials to run through, but once it's burned through those raw materials, it should hopefully just kind of slowly but surely chug along as things come in from our gravel sifting setup. And I'm also hopeful that the little bits of zinc that kind of pop off, I'm hopeful those do end up not being a problem. Although, I think what we might be able to do, I'm pretty sure you can limit over here the number of items that come out. You'll see right now it says click with an item to replace, or click and hold for an amount. I'm going to change this from a stack. I'm going to change it down to like 16. The reason I'm going to change it to 16 is that should change the number that are extracted. You'll see right here, there's 64 raw iron. Right here, there's 16 raw iron. I think 16 raw iron is actually more sensible, because even though there's more iron coming in behind it, what should happen here, and I think some of that got extracted when the filter was off, but what should happen here is it should prevent this from happening, where the nuggets kind of come flying off, because there shouldn't be enough nuggets to kind of saturate the capacity of the depot, thus making it, hopefully, just that little bit more efficient. Why are you extracting bone meal, is my question. The filter is quite clear, but I do see bone meal getting extracted quite regularly there, which surprises me. I'm not sure why that's happening. We swapped it out to an attribute filter here, and the attribute filter is set to items that can be washed, but it's still pulling out stuff like redstone. It's not the end of the world, because all it really means is that things like redstone or bone meal, they'll go on the depot. As soon as they get on the depot, they'll just get sent straight around back into the dock. It's a little unfortunate, because I feel like it should be working, but for some reason, neither the list or the attribute filter are exclusively pulling out what they're supposed to pull out. But for the most part, this is now working. Let's make sure none of this junk ends up in there. Again, it's still going in there, which is, that's because I've not set this to allow. Isaac, you fool. Let me take all of that out, and now this should be working as intended, which is good. Middle mouse button there to sort. And so now we are hopefully going to start automatically getting iron, copper, zinc, and gold without having to do any manual processing. And over here, we're now at 54 steel ingots, which should be more than enough for us to start in the next episode working on getting these industrial machines. We also, hopefully, should be able to get down a bunch more of these steam engines, make our boiler much taller, and use that extra capacity to power more of these alternators to get power to these machines, which, if memory serves me right, can be quite power hungry and are probably going to need way more than the maximum 120 redstone flux per tick that you can generate with one of these alternators, but that is a problem for future Isaac. For now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Sky Revolutions there.